Remedy Entertainment are no strangers to fascinating and otherworldly level design with electric themes, whether it be the We Sing level in Alan Wake 2 or the infamous Ashtray Maze from Control. But sometimes, the best missions in games don't rely on one standout gimmick or simple shock and awe, but rather just a perfect sense of execution. And for Alan Wake 2, this execution shows itself best, for me at least, in Saga's 5th chapter, Old Gods. You see, in Alan Wake 2, you get to play out the story of two different characters in their own timeline, that being Saga Anderson and Alan Wake from the first game. And even though Alan's levels tend to lean more into the surreal and terrifying, Saga still takes the cake for the most horrifying mission in the whole game, and one of the best horror missions of all time. Partway through her journey through Bright Falls, this FBI agent and crime solver finds herself out of options as her partner in crime, Alex Casey, has gone missing, and leaders at an undercover top-secret organization called the FBC have taken Alan Wake into their custody. Her only option left is to look for some recently discovered family members, and to do so, she has to head over to a nearby creepy mansion known as the Valhalla Nursing Home. Upon arriving, something definitely feels off, where you are first met at the door by Rose, one of the creepiest characters in the game, and also a caretaker at the home, and she shows you around while assuring you that everything is alright. But as you look around more, you discover that this couldn't be any further from the truth. Creepy sounds can be heard all over this 3-story building, along with strange shadows and visual oddities always presenting themselves in the corners of your vision. You eventually are able to make your way to finding your grandfather sick in his bed, and here he is able to speak to you directly in your mind and tell you that something very, very sinister is going on here and that you need to stop it in order to save his life. Looking at his comatose body, you realize something needs to happen and happen quickly, and it's soon after this that you stumble upon a woman in her room named Cynthia Weaver, who turns out to be a taken, or possessed human, haunting this house, along with other small scares here and there from some of the other residents like Aki. And it's now that you know things have gotten really dire, so you instruct Rose to give you a key to head over to the wellness center nearby in order to investigate further. And it's here you're met with seemingly endless, terrifying jump scares from Cynthia, as she and other Takens start to attack and chase you down as you look for clues on how to help your dying grandfather. This eventually leads you to discovering and opening a nearby overlap, which leads you into the dark place in the Upside Down, where you finally get to face Cynthia head on. You are led through never-ending copy-pasted hallways full of blood and horror as you slowly start to lose all sense of direction and your mind along with it. You have to crawl through rat and water-infested holes near the ground and defend yourself from shadows crawling in the dark, all while Cynthia maniacally laughs and taunts you in this twisted nightmare. And only after struggling through this onslaught for some time do you finally make your way to the boss room, where you will have to control the water and light sources while you try to take out Cynthia with every little bit of ammo and firepower you have left. It's one of the most adrenaline-pumping scenes in the entire game, and while I usually hate games that rely on jump scares like this, here it just works so well because it keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time and pumps that adrenaline into your veins while you fight with everything you have left, not only to save your body, but your mind to succumbing to pure terror on screen. And more than anything, it's just such a well done horror level, with almost everything you could ask for. That intense build up before everything even happens, where you simply get to walk around the nursing home worried that something might jump out at you, all while learning so much about the lore and location of the game, or talking with nice older folks at the home. Then the reveal that your grandfather has something much more sinister going on, followed by the never-ending creepy vibes from Rose and other residents, finalizing in the crescendo of a non-stop horror sequence with Cynthia Weaver hunting down your very soul. It's not a mission that did something super unique like We Sing, but the reason I like Old Gods even more than We Sing is because it just has flawless execution. Where most people remember live music in a game like this the most, sometimes something more simple can leave even more of an everlasting mark. And for me, as someone that doesn't even like horror, especially in games, that sense of intensity I felt running through this mission for the first time was surreal, and really made me appreciate the horror genre as a whole that much more. It made me get it in a sense, and since I've been able to go back and fall in love with games like Dead Space as well because of this mission. And it also is just Alan Wake 2 firing on all cylinders, the game at its best, where all the mechanics and combat, puzzle solving, exploration, and horror come together and seamlessly create a level that has has a vision and executes on it perfectly. No cute parlor tricks or great music that make it stand out and feel different, just doing what the game was meant to do and doing it immaculately. More than anything too, it shows that sometimes for great missions and quests and games, less is more, and simply focusing on the basics and doing them well can make an entire journey come together. More than any other mission in Alan Wake 2, and most other horror quests and missions out there in general, Old Gods really sets the scene for an unforgettable and intense experience. A mission that's legendary. I cannot stress enough how underrated and seldom talked about Prey from Arcane Studios really is. For me, it's without a doubt the most underrated game of all time, and a big part of that stems from its introductory mission, which is one of the most legendary starts to a game I've ever seen that will quite literally leave your jaw on the floor with how awesome and unexpected it is. Because as they say, first impressions are everything. But regardless, right at the start of Prey, you awake to the iconic line, "Good morning, Morgan. Today is March 15th. 2032, and you find yourself in a strange yet oddly elegant room with a computer and expensive desks nearby, along with a shower, kitchen, and a great view of the city. You get a call from your older brother and check your email to see that he is CEO of TranStar, a multinational corporation started by your parents, and that you will be having a meeting today to go over a top secret project you're both working on. So you gather your clothes and get ready to head out the back door to an elevator nearby your suite. That way you can go to the top floor of the apartment and take a helicopter all the way over to an office nearby, where you find your brother and discover that you are going on a mission to TranStar's Talos 1 facility, a massive space station orbiting around Earth as a guinea pig of sorts, testing out new technology you are heading as the VP of Research. But things start to get very weird right after this, as before you're sent on your way, you are put through a series of tests that include things like moving boxes for apparently no reason, trying to hide behind a chair in an open room while being observed, and wacky psychological questions and tests like the trolley problem that seem super out of place. The real insanity begins though right at the end of this testing, when one of the scientists observing you reaches out for a coffee he requested earlier and instead is met with a shape-shifting alien that leaps onto his head and sucks the soul from his body. Immediately gas floods your chamber and you are knocked out cold while hearing commotion in the background. And then, just like that, you awake once again in your bed to the phrase, "Good morning, Morgan. Today is March 15th, 2032. Only this time there is no friendly call from your brother, only horrifying shrieks and a bizarre sense of uneasiness. In fact, when you go to check on your personal computer this time, you only see messages yelling at you to escape from a mysterious person named January rather than the standard work exchanges. Now royally creeped out, you step into the hallway of your apartment building and discover a dead body of a maintenance worker with a wrench lying on the ground next to them. And getting even closer, it's revealed that the body looks just like the scientist that was attacked before. Something very, very wrong is obviously going on. And when you try to use any of the doors or elevators, nothing's working. You are completely trapped and alone. So you frantically run around your room trying to figure out what's going on, eventually starting to assault any inanimate object with your wrench in an attempt to find a way out. And this insanity eventually leads you to discovering that by hitting the window overlooking the city with your wrench, or a hidden fish tank outside your apartment, the glass breaks and unveils to you that you aren't actually in a city at all, but rather inside some sort of testing facility with tons of machinery and computers that were obviously being used to monitor you in a room that was all fake the entire time. Dread starts to fill your mind as you realize the game is a lot more than you originally thought. And as you start to explore around more, you discover that the elevator, the helicopter, and absolutely everything you saw before was nothing but automated rooms and looking glass technology that made it appear as if you were in certain places when really you were just being escorted around a demented maze like a trapped rat being experimented on. And after diving more into this insane revelation and reading through computer terminals as well as encountering more of those terrifying aliens you saw before, you discover that you actually are already aboard the space station Talos 1 your brother spoke about earlier, and that something extremely unusual is happening. I can't stress enough for those of you who haven't already played Prey just how amazing this intro is, and without question, it's one of the best first impressions I've ever had of a game, where despite my hate for scary things usually, I was so intrigued and in awe at what just happened on screen that playing more was basically a necessity. I distinctly remember my first time playing this game, I put it down after 1 hour because it just wasn't clicking, but because of how amazing this first intro mission was, I couldn't get it out of my head, and I eventually came back and discovered discovered what's now, in my opinion, one of the best games ever made. And for me, that's what great missions and games should be all about, where the thrill and mystery of it all is so immense that you can't put the controller or mouse down and just get lost in the world figuring it all out. It sets the scene perfectly for what's to come too, and only by the end of the game do you even get the answers fully painted for you, the perfect setup and first mission for such an awesome game. If you haven't already played Prey, and even more so its DLC Moon Crash, the best DLC for a game of all time that no one played, please give them both a shot. The Fallout series is no stranger to absolutely shocking, absurd, and thought-provoking encounters. Be it cannibals hiding in plain sight, a cult worshipping an atomic god that praises them with radiation poisoning, or any of the numerous twisted and sinister vaults full of experimentation on live human beings. But maybe the most riveting and legendary quest of them all comes from Fallout 3 with a questline titled Oasis. You see, Fallout 3 especially is known for its drab color palette and never-ending sense of dread and doom everywhere you go in the world. But if you happen to be wandering in one specific section of the map, you may stumble upon what seems to be little ferns and green plants starting to pop up all around the area. So if you follow this trail of growth, you eventually end up at what is known as Oasis, a sprawling town full of healthy and growing plant life along with a series of cultists. And as anyone who has played the game knows, this is a really fascinating moment because for the first time in your entire playthrough, you actually get to be in a place that isn't defined by drab dirt and abandoned buildings. It's a huge change of pace. But once inside, you speak to a man known as Tree Father Birch, who along with other cultists keeps telling you about this strange quote-unquote he who has been calling you to their colony, and that you will need to drink from the sap in order to speak to him. If you decide to do so, you're eventually led to none other than Harold, the source of all the flourishing plant life, an ancient talking tree that has suffered from massive radiation poisoning after the bombs fell and mutated, and also a character we originally met in Fallout 2. If you speak to him, Harold expresses his need to die, how he has struggled for hundreds of years now being stuck in this one spot at no fault of his own, and even in his speech you can see that he is starting to go crazy with boredom and sadness. He tells you that deep underground beneath him lies his heart, and that you need to destroy it in order for him to finally be set free from his eternal prison. But things aren't so simple, because after this, when you go back to talk to Tree Father Birch and another cultist named Laurel, you learn that the colony is actually split on what to do. Some want to apply a birch sap to Harold in order to stop his growth but keep him alive, maintaining the secret of the village while also maintaining the prosperity they've had. Others want to apply a liniment to Harold, which would only accelerate his growth and potentially, with it, the rebirth of a flourishing world. And if you're especially evil, you can even decide to now take your flamethrower out and burn Harold alive at this point, watching him scream in agony while the cultists attack you in rage. Regardless of the choice you make though, this quest is so interesting because of the gray moral choices it provides. If you decide to fulfill Harold's wish and destroy his heart deep underground, you might be dooming the lives of not only these strange hippie cultists, but potentially millions of others that would have survived with a world full of regrown forests like this. But if you choose to keep Harold alive for the cultists, or even the world's benefit, you are dooming this poor creature to an eternity of hell that he doesn't even fully understand. And this question only gets further complicated by the fact that if you speak to Harold more, you learn that he is slowly gaining power from the trees around him, being able to hear and see from their branches, implying he is gaining more and more authority over time. So maybe even that proposed utopia of the future would actually be nothing more than a nightmare forest run by a tyrant tree with a vendetta. The choice of what to do now becomes extremely hard to make, and it really forces the player to sit back and think about what to do next. This isn't a simple question of should I be evil and blow up a city with a nuke inside of it, or should I be a goody two-shoes and leave it unarmed? This quest really has no right answers, and makes us ponder about the needs of the many over the needs of the few and the implications of each. And being able to just explore the area and talk to lots of townsfolk about this conundrum is just such a fun way to set up this whole adventure. For example, if you speak to a young girl named Sapling Yu, she will tell you about how she always talks with Harold and tries to keep him company. And if you speak to Harold about her, he almost starts to look and sound happy for a moment, feeling at ease knowing someone out there really cares about him and his well-being. It really is just Fallout at its best, which is ironic considering this is one of the least Fallout adjacent locations in the entire series, full of greenery, happiness, and flourishing life. And even all of the different endings you can get here really make make you stand back and think about what happened. Like one where you can side with the townspeople and help Harold grow more, only for him to feel guilty about his request before, saying it was his duty to help people survive and not be selfish. Which implies killing him before may have been the wrong choice after all, but we'll never really know. Regardless though, it stands as one of the most legendary quests of all time, in a series that seems to produce so many. The Call of Duty series is no stranger to industry-defining main missions full of bombastic set pieces and Hollywood acting, but there is one specific COD mission that, for me at least, set the series up for becoming the juggernaut it is nowadays. Because you see, on a list like this, a lot of fans of the franchise would pick something like No Russian because of the cultural impact it had, but I think a mission that came in the game before it is the real most memorable in COD history, all Ghillied up from the original Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. The mission starts with you going into a flashback playing as Captain John Price deep in the heart of Ukrainian territory around a decade after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. You have to slowly crawl and hide as you infiltrate this Russian ultra-nationalist soldier-infested territory, and throughout each step you are nearly caught as men with huge guns pass by. Eventually though, you make your way into an abandoned Polisa hotel to prepare to assassinate Imram Zakhev, where you will set up on the upper floors and slowly wait while his entire entourage approaches. Acting as the shooter with a spotter by your side, you wait for the perfect moment to take your shot, over a mile away, and if you miss, it's mission over. It's one of the most iconic missions in the entirety of Call of Duty, and while it isn't my absolute personal favorite, I do think it's the most legendary because of how it showed how Call of Duty could handle the slower moments too. This game was the one that preceded Modern Warfare 2, which increased the intensity up even more, but without founding and pivotal missions like All Ghillied Up, the series may have never reached the highs it eventually did. And more than anything, for many of us that grew up playing Call of Duty and loving every aspect of it, whether that be multiplayer, zombies, or the campaign, missions like this were a huge part in setting the series up to become the cultural phenomenon it did, and why so many people fell in love with COD campaigns in the first place. And nowadays, it feels like every entry has standout missions that feel really epic, but this is where it all started.